Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Well, many thanks for joining us on the Journal of Biophilic Design today. Many thanks for everybody who's bought a copy of all the issues of the Journal of Biophilic Design. You can buy them on our website. You can buy an ebook version or a beautiful printed copy of the journal. We've got 5 issues out, and the next issue is going to be Blue Mind. I'm really excited to be joined by Morten Kvam. He is CEO of Skogluft. And not only does Skogluft sound a beautiful and uplifting word, in Norwegian, it means forest air. Skogluft creates living walls, which are super simple to install. So even I could probably do that. And has the added benefit that you can also download their app to let you know how to water the plant. So it helps you reduce the plant killing activity that might go on in your house or your home or office. Obviously, Skogluft's aim is to reconnect people to nature, and we're going to be talking about something Morten and Skogluft are really, really passionate about, and that's how plants help us feel better, to breathe better, and to also live better. And we'll also be looking at some of the science as well. So we also did an interview ages ago, one of our very, very first podcasts back in 2020 with Skogluft's co-founder, Stina Ventegren. And today, this one builds on that conversation. So first of all, Morten, many thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Well, first of all, can you give us just a quick overview of what Skogluft does, please?
Well, first of all, I would say that our aim is to reconnect people with nature. So that's the meaning of the life of Skogluft as a company. And we do this by offering Skogluft walls, or living green walls, and to both consumers and companies, and also the public sector. So everywhere when you have got a wall, you can have living walls indoors. So we are not offering anything regarding the outdoors environment. We are purely focusing and specialized on bringing nature indoors.
Okay, lovely. But what does Skogluft mean?
Literally, Skogluft means forest air in Norwegian, and that's because our founders are from Norway. But it doesn't really mean that we offer literally forest air. What we want to do is that we want to offer the positive effects on human beings being outdoors in the forest while one is still indoors. So it's possible to obtain many of the positive effects of being in the forest, also indoors, thanks to Skogluft. But the name sounds good, Skogluft, it's easy to remember, and we have also learned that in nearly all languages around the world are able to pronounce somehow Skogluft, and that's why we have got them, we kept that name.
Why are you working with Skogluft? Are you passionate about nature? Are you kind of connected to nature in some way?
Well, a very interesting thing here is that my background is really very different. Like, I've been working within banking, utilities, stock exchange, etc. So this is completely new world for me. And like Skogluft is also a business. So of course, you got the same rules applies for Skogluft as for a telco company or a utility company. But of course, it's very easy to be passionate about a product like Skogluft that really has got a deeper meaning, that really wants to improve the way we live, to improve the health of both young and adults, I would say. So it really makes sense to work bringing people closer to nature in a very different way as within many other business I had before. So I ended up here by chance, but of course now I understood like this is really well worth working for and what I should continue doing.
That's really good. Well, I'm glad you're working and doing something good. I think if we have a choice for business, I think if we can work with a company that's making the planet and the world and people better, then that's got to be a good thing. Can you tell us a bit about some of the research that Skogluft has been involved in, about how plants benefit air quality? I know NASA did something, but maybe you could explain a little bit about how Skogluft has been involved in that research, please.
Yes, so like our main founder, he is a mechanical engineer, but very early he understood that there's a need of biological models to explain the world. So pure mechanical models are not enough. So this is how he started becoming interested in bringing nature indoors. And he was convinced that human beings need to stay close to nature to have a good life. So then he started to look around who has got the same perception and the same thoughts as me. And he very quickly found that NASA were doing on effects of nature on human beings indoors. As when you are staying in the outer space, of course, there's not very much nature. So they studied, okay, how will the astronauts be affected by the lack of nature? So our founder, Bjorn Virumdal, he simply made a telephone conference with research responsible at NASA discussing this topic. So it was not like, I would say, a formal co-study or research. It was more kind of an informal dialogue that brought our founder even closer to the track of the effect of nature on people indoors. And then he got in touch with the Norwegian University of Life Sciences and some researchers there. And together they made a long-lasting study on the effect of nature indoors on human beings. So he started with an interest, they got confirmation from NASA, and then they started doing some real scientific research to have some numbers to prove that the thoughts he had really were true. The test was done on different plants, on different kind of lights on the plants, different ways of placing the plants in different environments, testing them at both at schools, at different working environments, etc. So what they mainly tested was like before and after, because it's always pretty complicated to study the effects of plants and nature indoors, as there are so many variables that influence. But like the main effects they found were linked to like three items, like the feeling of being awake, headache, and respiratory problems. So, for instance, they made these tests in different places, workplaces, schools, etc., finding out that tiredness was reduced by 40% after installing nature indoors. That's a very significant number. And also headache was reduced by 35%, and also concentration problems were reduced by 16%, etc., etc. So got many of these parameters, all of them showing positive effects of having nature indoors. So there are, I think our founder says we got like 7.2 kilos when you have printed all the research material, proving that the nature indoors is good for us as human beings.
Wow, that's amazing. Some of the evidence that's on your website, you mentioned, there's mentioned there that plants in a room may reduce the dust level of the air, and obviously the dust content of the air is often too high. It irritates the sort of mucous membranes in the eyes and the nose, and obviously it's bad for you. You just mentioned the respiratory organs. Obviously the increase in the air humidity, and I didn't realize, but that humidity actually binds the dust. Are there any other sort of benefits of plants that you'd like to share with us at this point?
Yes, it is, because like we have done the research, but the real most interesting feedback is the one we get from the users of Skogluft, those who have installed Skogluft. And there are a couple of things that have been a part of the research before, but that they state. And one is the acoustics, for instance. So the effect on acoustics weren't like a part of the research done, but we get feedback from very many where it's relevant, that the acoustic level is really improving a lot. Both it could be in like in large boardrooms or in large halls, etc., where they have got nature indoors and Skogluft walls. The acoustic is improved very much. And so that's one. And another thing is the less tangible, maybe, feeling of well-being somehow. So it's not that easy to measure or call it something, but it's a general feeling of well-being while staying close to the nature indoors and staying then close to the Skogluft walls. One interesting thing, for instance, is that when the companies make their photos for like the yearly report, or if they want to make a press release, etc., including people, they are very often made just in front of a Skogluft wall. Very interesting thing, this. So those who have Skogluft walls, we can see them via the yearly reports and via the press releases, because very often they're in front of a green wall. Yeah. So yeah, so those are like some of the effects that we haven't really studied but experienced as time has gone by.
Yeah, absolutely. And the, you know, you say the word well-being, and it's really hard to sort of quantify and to measure. Kind of like levels of happiness as well, because that well-being kind of, if we're happy, then we obviously reduce, you know, that those our cortisol levels. Everything is kind of, you know, is given that sense of joy in us, which obviously keeps us well and fit. I mean, maybe you could sort of talk a bit about how we can bring nature into our workplaces, for instance, and also maybe you could give us an example of where, yeah, a Skogluft wall has been, you know, actually implemented and the difference it's made, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Like Skogluft is made both for private homes and for businesses and larger public spaces, because it's modular made.
Yeah.
So one could have one module, for instance, in the bathroom that some have got, or you could have like 64 modules, like a large library outside Oslo have got, or you could have a waiting room at the dentist with 4 to 6 modules to reduce stress level if you have got if you fear of visiting the dentist, etc. So it's very interesting to see that many of the uses of the Skogluft wall, we have learned them from our customers, that they have approached us with a hypothesis. For instance, those regarding the waiting area for the dentist, they had the hypothesis of that stress reducing thanks to the plants indoors. So they've tested out in one office, and now they've got it implemented in all their waiting areas in all the dentist offices, for instance. Very interesting also for the library just outside Oslo. They have had it now for 10 months. It's a very large Skogluft wall, and they said that the effects were so positive and the feedback they received from the visitors of the library that they've now decided to install like nature indoors in all libraries in that city, just north of Oslo. So that's an example that I would say that it worked really. And that's a part of like the feedback we get from our customers. But as I said before, very often you haven't got like 100% tangible reasons why. It's more a general feeling of well-being, and it feels right, and it's good for the people staying in the room.
That's really nice. It's funny because over here we don't discuss libraries very much, and I know there's been kind of a cull of a lot of public libraries here, so I suppose in a way we're kind of losing them. But I think what a lovely space to install greenery and plants, because not only do you get that sort of harmony and that sense of calmness, and it's a kind of time out, isn't it, when you go and take yourself off to a space where you can read and you're edifying your brain and also your spirit and your soul and everything else. And acoustics, you mentioned acoustics. I think, yeah, obviously what an amazing thing to do, and actually put it into libraries. I'm thinking, you know, university spaces, study spaces, these are all really good. And obviously you mentioned hospital, you know, waiting areas. Have you installed them in schools and hospitals? And have you had any feedback on also of healthcare environments?
Yeah, so like in healthcare environments, we have installed them in the working area, the working space of the employees, but it's been like much challenging to have them installed in hospitals, because they are very much aware of living items, so to say. Yes. So there, it's a tough discussion with the decision makers to make them understand that the positive effects of taking plants indoors is much higher than the potential negative effects of having something living in an area that should be more sterile, so to say.
But there, like you say, there are places in a hospital environment where you can install it, like you say, the workers' areas or the places, their rest areas.
Yeah, and waiting rooms, reception areas, and like halls, public halls, so to say. So outside the treatment area, so to say, we have got different installations. But a couple of fun facts as well. One of the best Norwegian football teams have installed Skogluft as a secret tool to continue winning games. So it's very funny, but it's true. So they got that as a signal of vitality and life, instead of having these very naked walls, etc., as they very often have. They have got nature indoors in the club, in the club locals.
I love that idea. Obviously, I don't know if you saw, but the women's football team in the UK was doing really, really well, and then we just lost to the last minute to the Spanish team. So we could have done with having some Skogluft walls to keep us going, just to kind of push us just a little bit more, so that we'd have won. So I do love that. I love that idea. I'm going to be telling everybody about that. It's a nice little fact there. Obviously we just mentioned about like the sort of leaf type absorbing dust and the sort of humidity and all that kind of stuff. Do you have kind of plants that you prefer? Do you use a certain type of plant mainly, or is there a mix of plants? And yeah, I was going to say, which plants do you use, but also how many plants? And you mentioned modules. Maybe you could tell us just generally how many things are in a module, and then, like you say, how you kind of stick it together.
Yes, sure. I can say a little bit about that. Like, firstly, the plants, it's not by case that we have chosen what you often call golden pothos, I think, in English.
Yes.
Because research has also been done on which kind of plants have got the best effect on human beings. And what we saw is that the golden photos had a very positive effect, and stronger effect than many other plants. And the researchers didn't really study why, or didn't find a reason why, but one hypothesis is that the golden photos is producing a lot of chlorophyll. So one of the plants that produces the most chlorophyll per time unit per square inch, so to say. So that is at least the hypothesis of why this plant has got this very positive effect on human beings, and better than other green plants. But this is still hypothesis that I would be very keen to somehow some time to see a result of those studies. But there are also other reasons, because this plant is very robust as well. It looks very nice. And like it's very easy to maintain year after year, walls with golden pothos, because they survive. If you forget to give them water for a week or two, if you then add some water, they will continue living somehow. So they are extremely robust. So it's like impossible to fail nearly with the golden pothos. So you don't need to have green fingers. So it's easy to have success, which is also one of the items that stay us very much at the heart. It should be easy to both build the wall and to maintain the wall, and of course to have a long life, and the perspective of not having to change things and buy new items to make it continue living. So that's mainly the reason for that plant. And of course, the more plants, the more positive effects. But the traditional way of taking plants indoors maybe is to place them on the floor somehow, or on a shelf somewhere, on the windows, etc. But if you should have as many plants as possible within a limited space, then you need a kind of a module to place them very close to each other without taking too much space. So that was one of the ideas that was at heart of our founder of the company. How could we possibly place the most plants together on the smallest possible space without taking floor space, without taking space from the windows and the shelves, etc. So that was the idea behind the research, and they ended up then with the Skogluft modules. And one module is very easily, it's built by 4 trays on a wall mount, and with 16 plants. So 16 golden photos in each of these modules. And that's what you need to start, at least bringing some nature indoors. And then of course you can have 2 of them, or you can 3 or 4, or as many as you have space for at home or in the office.
I like that. I love the fact that it's very contained as well, and it looks very neat. So some people complain, they go, oh, it looks too nuts and wild, and while some people love that kind of look. And I think with the Skogluft offering is that you can make it as wild as you want, but it has fundamentally this kind of quite square sort of shape. And I'm just thinking, as a designer, I'd love to see that, like with a great big gilt frame around it, you know, kind of, you could do something really funky, or kind of like driftwood. So you could then really like, and then the plants could kind of like just grow around it, but it would look very, very neat. So in those boardrooms or those spaces where, you know, there's because there's always when you say, oh, I'm going to do this, there's always somebody that comes up with an idea of like, oh, well, you can't do it because, and I think there's so much flexibility with the Skogluft system. And I think the plants look just so beautiful as well, because again, they're uniform. So they have all that reduced visual complexity, because there's also that thing we talk about in environmental psychology, that if there's too many leaf types, it's very confusing for our little brains. So we want something kind of a moderate visual complexity, as Dr. Sally Augustin always talks about. So having something like, it looks like a sea, it looks like a water, and it's because you say the leaves are very universal, they're variegated and they're variant, but they are the same. So actually that's good for our brains as well visually. So I'm just going to say the name of it. I think in Latin, the Latin term, so if people are listening to it elsewhere and they don't know what a golden pothos might be, it's also known as the devil's ivy, apparently because it was impossible to kill, which is what you've just mentioned as well. In India, apparently it's known as the money plant, so that's going to tick a lot of boxes. But it's the Epipremnum aureum. I'm sure there's lots of people listening to this podcast screaming at me going, you've pronounced that wrong, lady. But I'm sure but I'm sure they can go off and look at it. So I think that's wonderful. So that's really good. You did mention about obviously they're almost impossible to kill, and obviously I just mentioned that thing, but you have an app as well. Does that work alongside the Skogluft system, or?
Yes, that's true. So like this is the first version of our app. So it's mainly the question of receiving reminders about watering, or you have got like FAQs to make sure to assist you in making the Skogluft walls thrive. And of course, access to the customer service, so you can send like pictures of your walls in case you have got some problems, challenges, or questions, etc. But what we also have in plan that not is yet realized is that we would like to create a kind of a community of all the Skogluft users, so to say, so they can share ideas, share experiences, etc. Maybe going beyond Skogluft as a product and as an idea as well.
That's really nice. So people will become like little plants themselves, almost, with a little community of green-fingered. But I think that's great, because a lot of people, again, another thing, people go, oh, I'm going to kill it. But if you have an app that can tell you, you need to give it a bit of watering, you need to give it a bit of love now, you've abandoned it too much, or stop watering it, you're drowning it. One of the two. I think that's fantastic. So so personally for you, Morten, what do you love about plants and greenery?
Well, in general, it's the well-being that you feel having it around you. Like I like very much to be outdoors. Like in Norway, you've got many possibilities to stay outside in the woods, in the forest. But still, we have to work sometime as well, and very often we are at home as well. So so really the knowledge of Skogluft and the Skogluft effects, etc., woke up both an interest and, how can I say, I started to understand really the importance of having the nature around myself. So we are practicing it in all possible ways as well. But I would say still that the best thing is still for the human being to be outdoors. Like Skogluft can never compete against staying outdoors. But the challenge is it's not possible to stay outdoors all the time. So for instance, when possible, I even try to make meetings outdoors, like either working in the park or walking in the forest, etc. So that's the best thing. And the second best is to make the same meetings in a room with Skogluft walls around you.
Yeah, that's lovely. I've tried to do that. I was trying to do it a bit more increasing, where you can have your meeting, if you instead of meeting in an office, try and meet it in a park, or go for a walk in the woods or something. Yeah, it's kind of, it puts a different dynamic on the meeting as well, doesn't it? Particularly if you have to have a difficult conversation, it can kind of diffuse it a little. So brilliant. So we're sort of coming to near the end. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to add something regarding the light, because what really gives a positive effect on us human beings is like light reflecting on nature somehow. So it's like we human beings, we are like programmed to stay in the nature. Like since we were like apes climbing down from the trees, like we have always been surrounded by plants and light together. So like our DNA is programmed to appreciate that, and it makes people react even more positively when we have got light reflecting on plants. But that said, like the plant we have shown, the chosen, like the golden pothos, doesn't need much light to survive. It's a very robust plant, but it works even better, and it even looks even better if like you have got a source of light reflecting on the walls. So light is a very important part, I would say, of nature indoors as well.
That's lovely. It's also circadian rhythm, isn't it? It's also having that, the changing of light. You know, it's other things you get problems in offices or hospitals or schools. They keep the light just at a certain one level. So all day you're almost artificially kept awake, or you don't have a downtime before you go home, or you just, there's no respite, is there really? You don't, or even you don't even ramp it up. Sometimes they start off yellow, so you wonder why you fall asleep by lunchtime. So yeah, it's important to have that natural light, isn't it, as much as we can through the window. And so how can people find you? How can people follow you? Which website should they go to, Morten?
Well, you might find much more information about us on skogluft.com. And of course, we are present both on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn as well, if you're interested.
Really, then, this final question, which is a complete fantasy question and a magic question, but I'll ask everybody at the end of the podcast. If you could paint the world with a magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like?
Well, first of all, I would like it to be as natural and obvious to include nature indoors in all existing and new building projects. Just like toilets are a compulsory part of most buildings, I think also nature indoors should be a compulsory part and standard everywhere, because it's the best for us human beings, and for sure it's the best for the business of the companies who install it. So both for health reasons, simple well-being, and for business reasons, I would say it should be compulsory to have nature indoors everywhere.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.